for welcoming everyone to our space today. We're really honored to have Mr. Franklin joining us for our conversation today. As you'll see on our agenda for today, we're just going to do some brief introductions. We're going to have a mini lesson led by Taylor on one of our tools we have here at Redbud, and then we'll be able to open up for that conversation. Before moving forward, I just want to preface that if you have any questions during the conversation today, please put them in the Zoom chat, and we'll have some help from the Together Bay Area team to sort through your questions. So let us get started. So, Chinte E Hamekgi, how are you relatives? I'm Rose Hammock. Again, I'm Pomo Wailaki and Maidu, and I'm an enrolled tribal member with the Round Valley Indian tribes. Here, I'm currently the community relations manager with Redbud. I'm also a co-facilitator for our Going Beyond Land Acknowledgements programming. In the community, I am a basket weaver, a beadwork artist, a dancer, and a language learner of our Wailaki language and Batsal or Eastern Pomo dialect. And I'm going to hand it over to Taylor for her to introduce herself.
Hey Tunani, Nikki Amsa, Taylor. Hello, everybody. I'm Taylor Pennywell. I'm Time Maidu from Berry Creek Rancheria, band of Time Maidu Indians of California, and I'm the executive director of Redbud Resource Group.
And it is my pleasure to help introduce Mr. Franklin, who's not only a mentor for me, but is also an uncle. He grew up with my dad, is close family to me. And in, many of our tribal communities, those close mentors are more like our aunties, our uncles, grandmas, grandpas, etc. Just to share a little bit about Reno, he is the chairman emeritus for the Kashia Band of Pomo Indians, a board member of the Sonoma County Indian Health Projects, a board member of the California Rural Indian Health Board, former chair of NATHPO and the National Indian Health Board, a presidential appointee to the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, former member of the Secretary's Tribal Advisory Committee to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and a board member of Save the Redwoods League. And in a little while, Mr. Franklin will be able to give us a little bit more formal introduction. And I want to hand it over to Taylor for our mini lesson.
Thanks, Rose. So today we are really going to explore this question through lots of other questions. And the question is, how can tribes leverage relationships with the government and with non-government groups to heal and protect their ancestral lands? The people in this room represent the government in some way, in some cases, or are a part of a group that is largely non-native led. And so we really want to take the opportunity to talk to Reno about this question, because he's a very, very effective relationship builder and is a very, very effective collaborator with lots of different types of people, as you're going to see through the stories and experiences that he's going to share with us. Now, before we start that conversation, I want to ground us in the sovereignty spectrum tool that you'll remember you explored in, I believe it was our third workshop in our program. And the sovereignty spectrum tool is a tool that helps organizations understand whether or not the actions that they're taking, the programs they're offering, the decisions that they're making are actually going to support a tribal community's ability, or empower a tribal community's ability to make decisions for themselves and to control their own resources. And so the idea is that you could take like anything that you're doing within your work and you could place it somewhere on this spectrum, and it's subjective and it can change over time depending on your relationship with a community or your knowledge of a community. And so you could see that like some actions are going to be sovereignty weakening because they actively diminish a tribe's right to make decisions for itself or protect its resources. Something like a fishing ban, right? A tribal fishing ban would be like a sovereignty weakening action, but also something like putting up a dam could be a sovereignty weakening action because it keeps the tribe from having access to their ancestral waterways and foods. Then there's sovereignty ignoring actions, and these are actions that just simply ignore the existence, input, or needs of a Native community as if they don't exist. So something like not doing tribal consultation on something that is going to impact a tribe, that would be a sovereignty ignoring action. And then a sovereignty strengthening action are actions that are going to actively improve a tribe's ability to make decisions for itself and control its own resources. So we're going to go a little bit into Section 106 and consultation requirements during this conversation, but engaging in active, continuous tribal engagement and collaboration and consultation would go on the sovereignty strengthening side. Something like land back also, right, would be on the sovereignty strengthening side. And so I want you to keep this tool in the back of your mind as we have our conversation with Reno Franklin today. I want to call you chairman, but I realize that I can't. We keep saying former and future chairman. So I don't know. We're just going to go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Taylor. I also want to talk about a few things here, which is 30 by 30 and the America the Beautiful initiative. I also want to mention that Mr. Franklin was a part of forming these tools. So hopefully everyone here in the Zoom room today is familiar with 30 by 30. But in a nutshell, in 2020, Governor Newsom issued an executive order which established a state goal of conserving 30% of California's lands and coastal waters by 2030. In addition, in 2021, the Biden administration issued an executive order on tackling the climate crisis and committed the United States to 30 by 30 through the America the Beautiful initiative. And I wanted to share a quote by Secretary Deb Haaland. And she says, "The America the Beautiful initiative reflects an inherently pragmatic approach that puts people at the center and outlines an exclusive, inclusive, collaborative vision where locally led efforts to conserve, steward, and restore lands and waters will help us reach our shared goals." And I resonate with that quote because we essentially all strive for good health and well being. And in order to have that, we all need to do this work together. I want to share on this next slide, in addition to 30 by 30 and the America the Beautiful initiative, is the Tribal Nature Based Solutions Grant Program. And if you not have heard of this yet, the Tribal Nature Based Solution Grant Program is a part of a first in the nation effort to address historical wrongs committed against California Native American tribes. Governor Newsom announced just last month, April 2024, that the state was awarded more than $100 million for 33 tribal land projects. As a part of the administration's Native American Truth and Healing process, the governor has been working collaboratively with tribes to establish this grant program, in which the grant can be used for ancestral land return, so land back, land restoration, workforce development, implementation of TEK or traditional ecological knowledge and tribal expertise, habitat restoration, and climate and wildfire resilient projects. So with that, I want to hand it back to Taylor and Mr. Franklin for our conversation today.
Alrighty, thanks, Rose. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and then spotlight Reno. Let's see, spotlight. There we go. I'm not going to spotlight myself, just going to be you. All right. So can you please introduce yourself and your people in the best way you know how?
It's horrible. It's like this big picture of myself. It's like talking to myself. It's so weird. Um, so for the record, once a chairman, always a chairman, and so 3 terms as chair of my tribe, and having chaired pretty much everything. Yeah, Chairman Franklin's very appropriate. So, Hen Maya Iwa, Toshish Jima Emta Reno Keone Franklin. Um, I'm a former chairman of Kashia Pomo tribe, a chairman emeritus, um, and a happy father, and a random Indian guy, and an Obama appointee. I like to always make sure that I point out when I say that I'm a presidential appointee, because I've served in the Obama administration. I actually served in the Bush administration as well, but not as an appointee. So, and then served through Trump, which was very exciting. And I'm currently serving in the Biden administration. So, but very proud to be an Obama appointee still, and the last American Indian Obama appointee left standing. So, yeah. So that's who I am, and proud to be uh, Kashia Pomo, and also Native Hawaiian as well. So I guess the easiest way to sum up the Hawaiian lineage is that um, if you know who Captain Cook was, that was my great grandfather times nine, uh, who ate him. So I've got that. Very proud of the fact that my family killed that guy, ate him, and own his spirit for eternity.
Alrighty, thank you. You're gonna feel familiar with Indian humor right off the bat, which is good. We're not laughing, we're crying. Okay, so so a lot of people in the room are new to tribal engagement or tribal relations work. Their interest in getting more involved in this work is why they're in the program with us. And so I'm hoping to start kind of simple here. And I want to have you explain to people what is a tribal chairman? Like, and what does a tribal chairman of a federally recognized tribe actually do?
So just the Kashia Pomo tribe, we are a federally recognized tribe. We gained our federal recognition from the U.S. government in 1916. Um, we have been on our reservation, selected reservation. We weren't moved out of our ancestral lands. It was a 4-year process to find a place that we thought was suitable, and eventually we settled in a place called Tsununu Chinal, which is translates into Huckleberry Heights. Um, our our chairperson at the time was an individual whose name was Robert Smith, who's my great times two grandfather, and him and our spiritual leader, a woman named Annie Jarvis. They went with the BIA solicitors and land agents and visited several sites, and finally decided that that village site was suitable, and so the federal government purchased that ranch for us, and we moved up there and moved our center pole and our roundhouse um, from Ducachal, the village of Ducachal, Huckleberry. I mean, excuse me, Abaloneville, and which was at a place called the Hop Ranch, and it moved over from one ridge to another and set up the reservation there. And we've been there since 1920 up on the ridge there. And so, you know, that time we were tasked with setting up a tribal government, which was something that was, pretty foreign to us. We still had our traditional form of government, our chief system, and and the sub chiefs, our roundhouse captains, and our religion. Kashaya is uh, different than a lot of the tribes that are around us, and that we still speak our language fluently. We still have our roundhouse ways, and are very much a part of what we would say called Kashaya Tawi, which is a reference to our cultural laws. So while we have several non-native religions within our tribe, we also have continue to practice our traditional ways as well. And a lot of the other religions that are in our tribe, they practice parts of our traditional religion. So we'll have the Christians or the Mormons or other religions that will come to our strawberry ceremonies, Kamsunu ceremonies, or during the Fourth of July celebrations. Those 4 days they'll come up. So we're kind of blessed to have been able to merge those without too much fighting. So the chairman position is hasn't been around that long. We've been up there in the Kashaya lands, our ancestral lands, for about we can prove it archaeologically for 12,500 years. Obviously, we know we've been there for significantly longer, but we can prove that existence to non-native people for that long. And so, but only for maybe the last, I think, 100 years, 105, we've had, the non-native form of government. And yeah, so to kind of that has evolved into a chairman's position. We took over our tribal government from the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the state of California. The BIA kind of went through 1930s and gave us all these like constitutions that they wanted us to live by, that basically gave the federal government authority over everything. Maybe 15 years ago, we went through and revised our constitution and removed them and changed up the way that we did business, which is great. More practicing sovereignty and controlling the way that we do things, whether it's issuing business licenses on our own or being able to cut a tree down. If you can imagine that, we had to actually ask, the great father back in Washington, D.C. for permission to cut a tree down. We kind of said, no thank you, we'll cut our own damn trees down without you giving us permission. So yeah, we asserted our own authority, our own sovereignty over our own lands, changed that up. The chairman's position basically is we govern the tribe along with the tribal council, sets the agendas, is responsible for the health and well-being. Like if anything goes wrong, a real chairperson will step up and say, this is my responsibility to make sure, and work with our tribal council to get these things done, set the agenda for the tribe for their term, and be really clear about it. Want to make sure that that the best interest from the kids to the ancestors to the elders and everything in between is looked after. So it's a heavy responsibility, but if done right, it's very rewarding.
Awesome. Thank you. And you clearly love it. I know that you are a model for a lot of other tribes and kind of upcoming leaders in Indian country. I noticed that you get brought on by a lot of other tribes to kind of like give advice or to hold roles while they're kind of like developing their own infrastructure internally. So I just want to call that out because I think that the way that you govern has been a model for other people.
Fortunate to have learned from a lot of you know there's this thing called elderly statesmen, and for me, Richard Milanovich is one of them. Billy Frank Jr., Marshall McKay, people that were patient with me when I was in my 20s and was a firefighter and just getting into tribal politics and learning to be a leader, and really stupid. And they were really patient and recognized that at some point I was gonna be what I've become, and took the time to mentor me and really instilled that you got to pay it forward, got to do this for others. We're only as strong as those who we bring up with us, and and all these guys, they've all passed on, and the other day a couple of other folks, we were looking at each other thinking, damn man, we're those guys now. They've tagged us, we're it. Like, what are we doing? And we actually had that conversation. What are we doing? Are we building these youngsters up, or are we tearing them down? Are we too critical, or are we supportive? You know, like, how patient were these guys with us? Like, damn, yeah. So yeah, these blessed to have had that instilled in me and to be able to pay it forward now. It's a good thing.
Yeah, really appreciate that. We're gonna go back to Kashia in a little bit, but I want to pivot for a moment to the your work on the advisory council on historic preservation. Maybe you could tell us like what is the role of this entity and how have you worked within it over time to create new opportunities for tribes?
So I would say anybody to go to ACHP, and if you can't spell it, you probably shouldn't be on this call. ACHP.gov, and advise you right now, go on it and click on Indigenous knowledge. And the Indigenous knowledge policy is something that we just passed within the last maybe month and a half, and that's pretty much the pinnacle of it all, right? I've been working on that for years. It's something that we've needed in Indian country, in Native Hawaiian country, and then across the board for, well, since non-native people got here. And it's all summarized in that. If you want to see what I've been working on, if you want to see what we need, it's all right there. you know um, Indigenous knowledge is self-supporting and does not need third-party validation. chew on that for a while. Think about what that means. And then I'll tell you what it means. It's some non-native person talking to one of my elders, and my elder saying, "Hey, that rock is sacred." And that non-native person saying, "Well, explain to me why." And then me coming up and slapping him upside the back of the head and saying, "Because he told you so." That's what that is. It's just a fancy way of writing that down and me not having to slap that dude upside his head. And we put that in federal policy now. Department of Defense is adopting that. USDA is adopting that. Department of Interior is adopting that. You know, when you have federal agencies that all 100% agree that that is the correct policy and contribute to it, and you've spent 14 months consulting with Native American tribes, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, Guam, when you've had American Samoa consult, you know, we took the extra step of reaching out to all the territories as well because this policy can affect them and has potential to. They recognized it and they thanked us. And so, what does the ACHP do? We set historic preservation policy for the country in the outlying territories. And historic preservation is what either protects or destroys our sacred sites and our historic sites. So, you know, we're tasked with doing that. Um, I'm the American Indian Native Hawaiian representative that's appointed by the president. I actually have presidential authority vested in me. I have this fancy little document that says so in some parchment paper and signed by the Secretary of State and the president, vesting those authorities in me. And it's actually the same authority that's vested in our generals to make decisions on behalf of the president. So it's quite a bit of authority. And that's what we do at the ACHP. We also changed the U.S. burial policy. And the previous version of that was done in the 1990s or maybe the early 2000s. And it was just crap. It was done without consultation. It was done by archaeologists, and I know some great archaeologists, really good people, and I know of some really crappy ones too. And you know, that thing was just all about science and nothing about Indians. You know, nothing about Native Hawaiians and Native Americans. It was just written to facilitate the destruction of burials for science. So we got a hold of that thing too, and took the word science completely out of it, and include indigenous knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, and the requirements to talk to tribes and get consent before destroying our burials. And we changed that policy. And we got 100%. We got a unanimous vote on that as well. And so when you hear me saying unanimous vote, that means votes that included I want to say it's like 20 federal agencies and their representatives that sit on the advisory council along with us. And so, yeah, you know, we've been systematically um, tearing down at the immoral fiber of the country and replacing it with indigenous fiber, and that has been a beautiful thing to be a part of. And man, we're almost done now, and so we're kind of looking at a couple of other things. We got a thing that we're working on for Native Hawaiians in the rebuild of Lahaina, and giving them some exemptions to allow the fish ponds to be restored. Uh, but yeah, you know, lots of work there, lots of things that tribes have needed for a long time that we're now getting done. And we want the states to adopt these things, and I think the states will.
I'm curious, like, what has your experience been like working in that space with the federal government, and how have you sustained your ability to stay in that space as a Native person?
I think the bigger the Indian, the more scared they are. No, I'm just joking. No, it's been it's interesting, right? Because you know, this depends on the people on the other side. You know, going in the Obama administration, you know, the other side of the table was really good folks that wanted to hear, but we didn't have all the paths forward yet, but we laid the groundwork during that era. And in the Trump administration, you know, I remember sitting there and pleading with them as they were building the wall and they were going through these burials, in all due respect, that belonged to the Tono Autumn Nation. And again, I apologize for bringing that tribe up and speaking of their burials in a good way. And I apologize for speaking of it. But Indians were just destroying these things, and the tribe was begging them to stop. And I remember the individual that sat across from me that was in the position that should have known better and could have stopped it. And I remember saying to her, like, hey, your responsibility, this is not just the tribe, but this is the nation's heritage. Our responsibility at this table isn't to the administration, it's to the nation. You're allowing it to be destroyed. What are you doing to stop that? And they said, oh, well, we'll reach out to the tribe, but we'll do that right away. And I just wanted to say, like, say Ufa, you're not gonna do anything, lady, like prove it, and I knew she wouldn't, and she didn't. It was just frustrating to see that, and but the message got delivered and it was on record. It's just, yeah, so sometimes it's real frustrating, you know. Um, and then being the only Indian a lot of the time, it's real frustrating. But I feel that more often than not, there's open ears and people that want to learn. And I say a lot of prayers before I go in those rooms. Yeah, it's a lot of people praying for me. And I know it. So I think that's what gets you through it, and keeps you on task when when it's real lonely at times, right? So, but that's what gets you through and keeping you on mission and keeping you humble and stops you from cussing when you want to cuss and just getting it done. Like just get it done. That's it. I have a fire background, and that fire background really lends itself to being in those positions and staying on mission. And that's really what it's all about. It's tough though. It's real tough.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that you're in a position that you have been placed into by spirit and by ancestors, and when you know that that is what's grounding you and putting you in the place that you're supposed to be in, there's really no failure in the work if you're doing it from a place of spirit and of ancestral purpose. And I could really hear that from you.
Yeah, I mean, you'll fail. It's just no matter what, there are going to be those times when you know it just doesn't work out. Failure is different at that level. The stakes are so high that like failure comes in different ways. It it it's so small. Like the big failures come at the health in the health arena. They don't come in historic preservation or land management. It's very rarely, right? Like we're facing that right now with Oak Flat. We had a huge win when we were able to delay Oak Flat. And that came from the Trump administration. And under Biden, he hasn't done shit, and he knew what he could have done. And it's been frustrating for us. That's the failure, is that, you know, under under Trump, he's the guy was an idiot. He just backed away, didn't realize what we were doing. And that, that ACHP delayed. We're the last signatory. We were the last one. And it came down literally to 24 hours, and we delayed. And the Trump appointee was the vice chair of the ACHP at the time, which meant he was the chair because the chair was gone. And this guy named Rick Gonzalez, man, he's a Cuban architectural historian from Miami Beach. He called me up, said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Delay it. Give me 24 hours." He says, "You got it, bro." And we delayed it for 24 hours, and Trump was out. And that gave us just the amount of time that we needed for the USDA new guy at USDA to redo it, ask for a different process. It came that close. Oak Flat came that close to being destroyed. Then it allowed them to sue and go the route it did. That's a
So
little
there's
victory, right? It seems so small, but now it's like it's got to go to the Supreme Court when they could have just reintroduced legislation, got it passed, and removed that because it got put in the Defense Act. That's how it got pushed through. But it's just little stuff like that. The failures at that level, it seems so small. It's just little things that have big impacts. Little tiny things that have huge impacts. You just have to know where to make that little impact to little tiny change to have that big impact that you want. It's really hard. It's really tough.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw someone put in the chat, and I think this is a good time to ask the question, which is how does your work in this space change depending on the administration? I sometimes like note to people that like it's not necessarily like Republican or Democrat in terms of alliances
I'm a
with.
Republican, right? I'm not a Democrat. Everybody thinks I am. Like Obama had like 5 Republican and I'm one of them, but I'm Indian first. I couldn't really give a damn about the D's or the R's. They're both idiots. If it comes down to it, I'm blessed to be Indian first, and that's it. And so how does it change by the administration? It really, I mean, honestly, in historic preservation, it didn't change until the second half of Trump, because the Trump's initial appointees were so stupid. They were so dumb. These guys and gals were like just like TV ad sales people that you would see, like like the 2 o'clock in the morning pitching socks that were super comfortable or something stupid. I mean, they were just dumb. But the second 2 years, these guys were badasses, and they knew the levers. They knew those tiny changes to make the big impacts. And I sat across the table from a lot of them, especially on the CEQ, the Council on Environmental Quality. I sat there and watched these people, and they were badasses, man. And they made some mistakes, and that's how we changed everything. But yeah, so to answer that question, it just depends. You know, that they both bring people to the table, and you can just whatever the agenda is. When the 2 billion came up, if you know what I'm talking about, the $2 billion donation came up, everything changed. All of a sudden, there were different people that were sitting across from me. That's when it got scary. That could happen either way, but whatever the agenda is going to be. So we all know what it is for one versus the other. I'll take the Democrat agenda any day over the Republican one right now.
Yeah, and that's just something I want to reiterate to everybody, because a lot of the people in this room, we all come from like the Bay Area region of California, and so we have a certain perception of what our values are politically, what our values are ethically, how we are good people and how we are not good people. And I like to encourage you, when you're approaching Indian affairs, to break out of a political spectrum, because Indian affairs is a different thing. It exists outside of the spectrum. It's a different plane. And so if you approach Indian affairs thinking that you're going to apply one of those political lenses onto it, it's not going to work, because that's not the world that those politics exist in. They exist in their own world.
Definitely, and if in an election year, especially, you're going to hear all kind of crazy stuff. Yeah, it is what it is. But I've been doing this for 22 years, so pretty dialed in at this point.
Yeah, I want to zoom in for a second on the Section 106 process that you mentioned, because it's a process that, despite having been in place for a while, many people don't understand or they don't follow through with. And so I just want to give a moment to discuss what is the Section 106 process and why is it following it so important for strengthening tribes' ability to practice sovereignty.
So in a nutshell, 106 is a federal process, and it's a federal process when if there's a federal undertaking that's going to affect a historic property. So it could be historic property, could be anywhere from. This is a great example is especially in the Bay Area, um, Golden Gate National Park, or Crossaway Point Reyes, anything that is historic, the China Camp uh, parks and all of those really cool looking things, to an Indian mound that exists. So anything like that, anything over 50 years old, if it's a structure, um, yeah, if you're going to have an impact on that, the 106 process is, the consultation that you would have with the American Indian tribes uh, on, build a bridge, and on the other side of the bridge is an Indian site, and you're going to impact it. How are you going to impact it? How are you going to mitigate it? How are you going to avoid it? First off, and it's that consultation process that you go through.
What do you think
Obviously, it's
is,
way more detailed than that, but I'm trying to give it like, without doing like 2-hour class. I'm
oh yeah.
sure all of you really want that, but no, you're not getting that today.
Well, I'm curious, like, why do you think people don't follow that process with fidelity?
Well, I mean, this is the wrong group. You know, I'm sure all of you are, saints in your own right. Um, but if you had that conversation with a developer, they don't want to, they're looking for the path of water, right? The easiest path forward. They don't want to have this long belabored process. They want to be able to construct the bridge, and if a couple of dead Indians are in the way, well, that's their problem, not ours. We want to just construct the bridge for the cheapest price possible because we underbid it anyway. Right? That's that perspective. That's how they see it. So, yeah, so it behooves them to try and skirt that process if possible. There's plenty of really good contractors out there that don't do that kind of crap, but there's also quite a bit that do. The energy space is filled with them. The oil and gas space is filled with them. That I I saw one. I had one complaint come to me, and they were making these Indians down in the Mojave Desert that had to monitor a part. They were doing some kind of extraction process, and as a part of that, they were near cultural sites, and so the tribe was making sure they weren't touching the cultural sites. They didn't trust these guys, and who the hell would? And they would helicopter their people in every day and make the tribe hike in for 5.5 miles every day in Mojave Desert, and that's just the kind of stuff that they do.
Oh, I see. Okay, we got a question here from Annie. How does your work at the federal level translate into tangible benefits for your tribe?
Well, I mean, that 30 by 30 thing in the America the Beautiful plan, we wrote that tribal section that's in there. It's a small group of us that got together, tribal leaders from across the country, very small, nameless group that got together at the request of then Congresswoman Holland, and started fooling around with ideas on if we had to do kind of like a federal policy on the return of land to Indian tribes and conservation, what that would look like. And um, worked at it for about 6 months. The election process was coinciding with that, and eventually, it ended with um, the very valid election of President Biden, and kept working at it. And eventually, she became Secretary of Interior and continued asking us to work on it. And people from that group accepted high level appointments, and we kept working on it. And America the Beautiful plan started to roll out and roll in, and the White House reached into our group, and eventually the tribal section that's inside of the America the Beautiful plan was literally a cut and paste from the document with the recommendations that we proposed. And so that got adopted by several states, adopted by Interior and USDA, and my tribe directly benefited from that in the end. Rose was talking about the announcement that the state just made. Kashia is one of them, where we got awarded 4.5, 4.8 for a land back. Went through that process. It was a very rewarding process. We had a highly competitive proposal, and that, Annie, as you know, we have our Kashia Coastal Reserve, which was our efforts to get our western gate returned to us, as was the return of our creation place. But we wanted to go after our eastern gate, and that starts with our trails that are underneath what is now Lake Sonoma, and the headwaters of our the Wheatfield Fork of the Wallala River, and so we actually did. We reacquired those 15 to 1,800 acres that encompass the headwaters of the Wheatfield Fork of the Wallala River, where we get our drinking water for our reservation, which is important to us for non-point source pollution that we know some of those wineries are doing.
Yeah. On the land back conversation, because you've had a number of successful kind of high profile land back cases in Kashia, how have those land back cases involved partnerships with, or even relationships with, like, landowners, agencies, NGOs?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's so different for us because we have a really strong environmental program, right? We're a federally recognized tribe. We have a great a great environmental program. Our environmental director, she's such a headache. She ever sees this, she's gonna hate me. But she's amazing. And we have a strong BIA roads crew, and now we have fire crews, and so we have like that knowledge on how to maintain a property. And so we for us, when we're applying for this kind of stuff, I don't need partners anymore. I don't need somebody else to come in and tell me how to manage this property. You know, in the beginning though we needed that, and we partnered with local folks. Our forester. You have to, like, everybody's like, oh, you can't log. That's stupid. That is dumb. You better log. And the thing is, though, you got to be really selective about it. And you're not trying to like clear cut or anything dumb, but you have to manage your property. If it's never been logged, you don't need to. If it has been, then everything just, the regrowth is introduction of non-native species and all these things that come in and just choke your forest. You got to create a healthy forest. Otherwise, you'll have fires, and that fire will create it for you. And so all those kinds of things that are in proper land management, you know, restoring a native habitat to the way that it was is almost impossible, but can be done almost to a certain degree. So in the beginning, we really partnered with a lot of folks to help us with that process. The handoff has been nice. It's been very nice, you know. And now our partnership is more of like, we have like the Moore Foundation, which is just freaking amazing, and that on our coastal property, they fund a lot of our research. And so, we're doing underwater research to check the health of our underwater species and looking and trying to reintroduce our abalone and protect our kelp beds. At the same time, trying to figure out, why we're getting so much garbage from Japan that's floating onto our shores and into our rocks. And how healthy is the underwater life that's down there. So we're doing a lot of testing. And so our partnerships have morphed from helping us to get the land, helping us to manage the land, to now helping us to understand what's underneath the water and do the environmental testing, partnering with the state to do um, uh, you know uh, trainings for our youth and how to identify bear, scat, and bear habitat. Looking at other animals, inviting other tribal people in to teach them, different um, techniques for tracking elk or whatever we're trying to track, what other animals and birds that we're trying to track on our properties. So it's kind of neat. It's a nice handoff, right? It
Yeah.
goes from acquisition, and I think the NGOs that like Kashia is really good about teaching people, here's your place with us. And they're really good about saying like, cool, we're here to help. So there's a beauty in that, and then maintaining that really good relationship with us.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say explicitly that like what you just heard is the example of resource transfer to a strong sovereign tribal government. This is what we're talking about, right? Is we start with sovereignty strengthening relationship building, and eventually those resources that have been systematically kept from tribes through colonization, retransferring them back to tribes, retransferring capacity back to tribes, and then the end result is a sovereign nation that is standing on its own and is educating other people. And I could say like for our long-term goal at Redbud is like the norm is that the native people are in the front, are the leaders, are setting the standard for the culture and for the knowledge. But we can't get there, right, until that capacity is transferred and back to us. And those resources are transferred back to us. And so what he just explained is that, right? And it's been successful. I'm curious if there's been any growing pains along the way in terms of those relationships. It seems like you've been good at like setting boundaries, but not every tribe is good at that or knows how to do it yet. And so have there been any lessons along the way?
I think we did a good job on the onset. Shia, it's a way I want to say this, and I better not because it's being recorded, but we don't just jump in bed with anybody. We're very selective, you know. Um, yeah, you know, we were careful in the beginning, you know, as for so speaking to the coastal reserve, when we first conceptualized it, you know, and the Richardson family first came to us and said, "Hey, we have this idea, you know, we want to get this land back to you guys. We don't want to sell it. We'd rather you guys have it." We we had other uh, groups approach us and say, "Hey, we'd like to be a part of it," but they're like they just didn't align with what we saw, right? Like we wanted to make sure that we aligned with a group that we thought had the same morals as us, understood what it is that we wanted to do. We walked into it with our eyes open, and you know, it's very stubborn Indians, you know, like this is what we want, and if you don't conform to us, then yeah, have a nice day, right? And so you kind of like had those set of ideals that you weren't going to bend from, and so when we walked into it, we knew, and and that kind of set the tone for everything that followed. And so when you have that going into it, it tends to lend itself to a happy relationship. And so we have not had growing pains with any of the foundations, you know, whether it's Lannon or Moore or TPL or anybody else that we've partnered with for the acquisition. We've maintained great relationships ever since, including the county of Sonoma, you know, and yeah, you know, and I think that's probably because we were so selective at the beginning part of the process that now, um, you know, we're doing really well. Good relationships. In fact, TPL uses us, you know, sometimes when they like, you know, are looking for funding from other folks. Want to, they'll fly them out. We'll meet them out there and say, yeah, this is how this worked for us. You know, it's definitely a model, I think, for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know, I was discussing before this question about how tribes becoming the leader, tribes becoming the model, tribes becoming the educator. We have a good question in the chat that kind of incorporates that from Paul. He says, "Can you speak to how our community, like non-native, whatever organization, can best acknowledge and promote the concept of cultural landscapes as opposed to geographically defined cultural sites?"
Cultural landscapes as to geographically define cultural sites. Yeah, I mean, yeah, how like to acknowledge it. I mean, I think Paul, you guys are doing that, or I guess we're doing that right now with you know, some of the work being done with the Yurok tribe, right? Um, a good example of something like that is the work that's being done upriver to remove the dams. And so the viewpoint the viewpoint of a fish passage is folks are going to look at a river and they're going to say like this river is cool, it's beautiful, and fish use it as passage, therefore it's cool. and and we should respect it and protect it. But then you get like this, you know, Indian viewpoint of it, right? And what obstructs that passageway, and how do we consider what that passageway is for these fish, and and then you start to get into a more detailed conversation of what a cultural landscape looks like, which would be that though that entire passageway for those fish to go through. The passageway itself is sacred. The passageway is the protective spot, it's the cultural landscape, it's the entire piece, the entire place that those fish are traveling. The individual blockages are like, you know, those are those spots that have to come down, right? And in the days before those dams existed, those there wouldn't have been blockages. They would have been prayer spots along the river that Indian people would have gone to and done ceremony to assist the fish in their passage, to assist the fish in their spawning, to assist the fish in the places that they would go to, knowing that that would be the place that they would die. and where they were supposed to go to die. And so, you know, the removal of those individual places or the changing of those individual places, and what does that do to this sacred place, this sacred path that exists, you know? And so what do you do to then protect that cultural landscape and to, you know, to then you know, interpret it, speak to it, address it? I think we take a step back and we remove those barriers like we're doing, and then we help facilitate what needs to be done to restore those things that were removed. And so the league is playing its part, and I think more conservation companies, more logging companies need to do what they need to do to play their part. You know, what if logging companies said, hey, we're not gonna log for a mile and a half, we're going to put a mile and a half zone along these rivers, and we're going to restore tribal rights for a mile and a half on either side of these rivers, and facilitate these prayer places up and down it forever in perpetuity. You know, shit, dude, how cool would that be? And we're facing the same thing now with offshore wind, right? They want to put these turbines up. Kashia Pomo tribe is against it. And I happen to have a lot more authority than people realize, and pushing back on that in my position on the ACHP, in that we have the same issue. You know, is it going in Kashia territory? Yeah, yeah, it is. Humboldt Bay, that's Kashia territory when it comes to the water, because that's part of the path that those fish travel and go through our neck of the woods. And so, yeah, that's our path. It's their path. We recognize that it's a shared path for all Indians up and down the coast. And so they're protecting what we would hope that they would protect those tribes up that way. And so that, you know, protecting that pathway both above water and below water, above for our winged, you know, friends and relatives, and below for our finned and whatever else, scaly. Yeah, so it's the same concept, you know, same concept. So, yeah, just on that offshore wind thing, Shia Pomo tribe, we said that, you know, we're being in favor of it because we think it also is very, very important to divest away from oil and gas, but at the same time, not on the backs of our resources. And so we would be in favor of it if they would file no take permits. And so if you don't know what a take permit is, that means it's a permit they file because they're going to take an endangered species or harm an endangered species. So if they can develop something that wouldn't harm any species at all, shoot, yeah, man, we're all in favor of it. Go for it. But they don't have technology to do it right now, so we're
Yeah.
not in favor of it.
Yeah, and you know what Terran Franklin just discussed reminds me of our whose water are you consuming water map activity and conversation
Yeah.
that we had when we started looking at, okay, what tribes am I connected to just in terms of the water that I consume? It is so much more than just your local tribal community. It's all of those watersheds beyond the specific place that you live, and all of those species and all of those tribes, they're outside of the territory that you live in currently, right? Like Humboldt Bay is up north, but that's still Kashia. Kashia still has a relationship with that place,
Oh,
still has a spiritual and cultural relationship with that place. If you're in the South Bay of San Francisco and you're consuming your water, your responsibility when taking care of that watershed is not just to those Ohlone groups, it's to the Maidu groups whose water you're consuming. Right. And so a part of understanding the cultural landscape is getting out of your local space and understanding the interconnected responsibilities that you have in other territories as well, so that you can look at the relationships that we all have with one another. So were you going to add something?
no.
Okay, good. Okay. So I didn't want to stop you. So Annie has a question here. We do have, okay, so not everybody here is has to comply with section 106 tribal consultation, but we want everybody to do it. You know what I mean? We want everyone to engage in tribal consultation. And so the question is, how can organizations that don't have to comply with section 106 still support tribal sovereignty, engage in healthy, responsible consultation?
You know, 106 is that's just one regulation, you know, it's a federal one. There's CEQA, you know, and NEPA is also something, AB 52. There's so many regulations that exist, but I mean, honestly, like, majority of the organizations, the NGOs that exist, there's nothing that stops you from reaching out to tribes and getting to know and understand the tribes that are around you. In fact, I would like shame on you if the only reason why you're talking to tribes is because you have to, right? Like, come on. Like, I mean, I don't only talk to white people because I have to. Like, I generally like white people. Like, it's like it's just like all of a sudden going to say like I'm not talking to any white people unless I'm forced to. Like, what is that, right? Or I'm not talking to any African American people or any Latino people. It just doesn't make sense. So why would you do that? Hey, just go. If you are working in an area, if your primary responsibility is Northern California, hell, man, reach out to some Northern California tribes. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, cherry pick. I would go to an event. That's not that. There's nothing that stops you. If you're working in Northern California, there's Indian events. There's Facebook pages dedicated to it. Just go. And I would suggest this though, like go to tribal events. It's cool. Go to Stanford. Whatever powwows are not a California thing. So I would kind of warn against that because you'll get jaded with something that's not from the area, a cultural event that's not from the area that you're in, and it'll kind of mess you up because then you'll be like, oh, I heard the drums. And you come to my reservation, they're going to look at you like, okay, here we go. Next thing is you're going to be Cherokee and all that stuff. So like you can look. Yurok got August 17th. Yurok has their salmon festival. They're bringing it back. It's open to the public. It's so cool. You will learn so much. There's so many different events that come up that are open to the public. And Redbud, I'm sure you guys could probably, if you don't already have, a little calendar of events or email notice that you can send to people. And I just would highly advise any of you that if you're working and you want to understand tribes better, you want to talk to them outside of a regulatory context, go for it. That's a good way to do it. And then when you do have to talk to tribes and it is something that's regulatory, you've already established that relationship and build a little bit of trust and have a little bit more understanding. And it goes a long way with tribes.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that creating like internal policies around tribal consultation is something people can do?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It just depends. It depends on your organization. Like, you know, you got to be careful with creating some internal policies because sometimes the requirements for consultation are legal, right? And so if you're creating a policy and it's kind of loose, and then you have like a strict consultation requirement, and you're not meeting that, and your policy doesn't meet it, then you can get yourself in some trouble. So I think you know, um, and looking at some policies isn't a bad idea. Having something on paper that says, "Hey, this is what you should do." In the event of, I think probably you want to talk to somebody that understands what consultation policies should look like to keep yourselves out of hot water. It's not too complicated, but it again, it's kind of one of those things where a little something can get you in a lot of something. So you want to avoid that. So you know if you do a consultation policy, it's good to have one, but it's also good to have somebody who's knowledgeable on the subject review it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question about the Indigenous Marine Stewardship Network.
Oh yeah, I love it. Yep.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that and why it's meaningful to you?
It's indigenous, they're Marines, and they steward things. Well, just messing around. Yeah, I think my tribe's actually a part of that. Like, and it's I probably should know that because I actually think I spoke at an event or
I
something.
think that's why
But
the question's coming up.
yeah. Yes. So again, my environmental director would hate me for what I just said, and which is even more fun. Now, it's a collection of tribes, and Sandy Inez, I believe, is part of it, and up in Crescent City, the Talawa Dene Nation, and Kashia and some others, and yeah, it's just partnerships. Um, we I went to a presentation of the work that everybody was doing, maybe 2 years ago, and Secretary Crowfoot was there from the state, and it's just really cool to see all the different things that this group of tribes is doing, all the different testing and the programs that people have put together, and a great way for you know tribes who are along the ocean and have ocean access to get together and look at data projects that we're all working on, and find the similarities, find support, and continue to support each other. It's really some really good projects that are being worked on. And
Yeah.
we actually, my tribe, we actually do. It's really neat. We do um, underwater. We do scuba certification for our tribal youth, and then send them underwater to go do research for us. It's pretty neat. I didn't have that when I was growing up. We didn't have a damn thing, so I'm kind of happy to provide that for our kids now.
Mhm. Totally, and that's just a reminder, people, that we talk about land back, but water back is right there with land back. Those things
Oh yeah.
are inseparable for tribes. Yeah, thank you. So I want to jump actually to kind of a bigger, more theoretical question, and I'm sure it's one that you've thought about before. Um, but okay, so we like to introduce the idea of intergenerational thinking to people when we do these programs. And so we talk about, like, what kind of ancestor do we want to be? What are we inheriting from our ancestors, the good, the bad, the ugly, and what are we going to do with that, right? To create a better future for future generations far beyond our lifetimes. And so my question for you is, what are your 100-year goals for your community? What are your 100-year goals?
100 years, huh?
What I like about this is, like, you won't be here. So
Oh
it
yeah, no.
forces you to think beyond beyond yourself.
It's like own an NFL team. No, I don't know. Yeah, I think I think if I look at what I inherited, right, for 100 years, we had 41.85 acres. That's it. Our ancestral lands are, 220,000 acres. And to be reduced to 41.85 acres is really shitty. You know, when the Russians first came here in 1812, they estimated around 30,000 Kashia people living in the hills and signed a treaty quickly with us because they didn't want to die. And we got sick of them sometimes and would burn their fields and kill their horses just to remind them of who daddy is. And, you know, we lived pretty well with them for a long time. And when the Russians left, the Mexicans and the Spanish and the Valley Indians and the white people from Oregon came down. And I say that because the white people from California weren't bad. It was the Oregon ones that came down to introduce genocide. We went from that 33,000 to 96. And those 96 Indians are what my great grandfather inherited. And I think about that often, and what he thought of, what that 100 years, what he must have imagined, what he was looking at and facing. They were living on this, you know, tiny little plot of land in our ancestral territories. Uh, they had really abusive people that lived near them. They had a guy that was ripping them off. His kids would go on top of our roundhouse and urinate and defecate on top of it, and people would regularly shoot at them. We had just had some of our tribal members hung in a mass hanging, and it was just a really shitty ass time to be a Kashia Indian. And yet he persevered along with our culture. What did he see? What did he think would happen in 100 years? Did he imagine that one of his, descendants, one of his great grandchildren, great grandchildren would um, take another, 550 acres and put it into trust and expand our reservation, which is exactly what I did, and exactly what our people did, what our Kashai people did in purchasing that land for ourselves. And I think that in the next 100 years, for me, what I would want to see and what I would hope would be that, you know, this time it's a woman that does it. This time it's a woman that does it because we've had women chair people before and tribal council members, but a lot of those big achievements, sometimes I wish that it would be one of them, like just like one of my great granddaughters would be really cool. Someone in that lineage. And yeah, for me, everything's land. Our Kashia Ama is sacred to us. And all of who we are starts and ends with that earth. And so getting it back is of the utmost importance to me as a leader. And I would want to see that. And all the other stuff, it's going to fall into place, and it does. You know, the resilience thing is important. I'm looking forward to seeing more resilience and strength and health for my people. I think it'll happen. But yeah, more land.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Alrighty, so we have about 10 minutes left to ask some questions, and if you can put them in the chat, we're gonna field them, and I'll go ahead and ask them to Chairman Frank.
Let me do something here because I can see certain people who I got here.
Oh yeah.
Roxy Layden. Hi, Roxy. Do you have a question for
Hi.
me?
Not really. It's a lot to take
It
in,
is.
and
It is.
yeah, it's also just really cool to hear the work because I feel like what we learn in this whole training is pretty like heavy stuff, like reality stuff, but it's also like really cool to like meet the people and the tribes who are like have done this work and to know that like a big chunk of your land has been gone, but like the work that's being done to like the work you do for your tribe and the native people to like continue that work and get your land back is it's really cool to be reminded of that.
Thanks. It's good. It's good. I hopefully someday get out there, visit some tribes, be able to do something really cool, take it with you. I'm gonna encourage you to do something, and I'm gonna ask you to reach out to this other lady that's here. Her name is Brenda Flies with Hawks, and she is one of my heroes. And reach out to her, and just reach out. Just say, introduce yourself to her, and uh, I promise you, it'll be one of the most rewarding things that you do all week, all month, all year. Okay.
She's actually on the board of my organization, so
Right.
I've gotten to talk to her. So yeah,
That's
I do
right.
feel
And
lucky.
keep engaging with her. She's one of the good ones. Okay, I'm gonna pick on somebody else here really quick, and then we'll go to questions. I know you're all nervous. I can feel it. I can see it. Let's see here. Bob Rogers, where are you at? I see a picture. Bob, are you there? Okay, there you
There he
go.
is.
Bob, how are you, man? I don't know you. You're on mute though.
Yeah, I
So
got it.
I feel like we're the same person because I've done what you're doing right now many times. Many times, my man. You're still on mute. Let me see if I there you
There he
go.
is.
Hey
All
Bob.
right, I am unmuted now.
Yes, sir. You are. Do you have any questions for me, Bob?
Just a quick comment. I found your comments about the organization very articulate, and it's just so nice and refreshing to hear a man like you so connected with the overall big picture in Washington, D.C. It was just fantastic for me to understand and appreciate what you were saying about all that. And I'm so excited about it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It's a real SOB going back there sometimes, man. I'll be honest with you, sometimes it bothers me so much that my grandmother, before she passed away, she would pray for me before I left, and pray for me when I came back. And then before she passed, she taught me that ceremony. So I do ceremony before I leave, and I do ceremony when I come back. So that's the way we have to do it. Thank you, man. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to go, and I'm just going to recognize one more person here because I love her and her husband very much. And I know she knows I'm talking about her because she's smiling. Shanti, good to see you. Hello, my friend.
Hi, Reno. It's such an honor to have you speak to our group. Thank you so much for bringing in the local wisdom and knowledge. And you're a force of nature and the work that you do on such a large scale. And it's makes me so honored to be able to work with you and the TIPO and all of the great monitors that we've worked with over the years. And we have some, hopefully some inspiring projects on the horizon. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, if anybody, I'm just going to tell you right now, if you know Shanti and where she lived at before, up there in the Jenner Headlands, right? If anybody's ever been up there, raise your hand or just do a clapping emoji or something. If you've never been up there, you need to get up there. But her husband told me the coolest ghost story of all time that is in one of the buildings up there, scared the shit out of me and my kids as well. And so I highly recommend you reach out to her and her husband and get that ghost story. I'm not going to tell it because I think we had a couple questions before we go. So turn it back over to you, Taylor. Thank you for letting me do that. That's fun.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah. Okay. So we got some good questions. One is people are interested in learning about the Kashia Coastal Reserve. Like what is happening out there? What's going on out there?
Oh, yeah. So, it's been nice. We've had it long enough to our tribal members actually believe it's ours. So, we acquired reacquired our coastal property, our coastal access. Man, I can't even remember. Annie, maybe you remember how long it's been now. It's like 5, 6 years, 7 years, whatever.
Yeah, I think it was 2016, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, geez, oh my God. Yeah, and so, it was a hell of a process to do it. And we were one of the first tribes to acquire it the way that we did. They wanted us to form an LLC and all this kind of stuff. And after many middle fingers pointed at the direction of certain individuals and companies that needed that middle finger, we explained that no, this belonged to the Kashia people. It'll be returned to the Kashia people. And so we had a land title agency or a land title group, that firm that said that no, they wouldn't write that. And so TPL grabbed us another title group and they wrote it. BIA supported it. And that was a return to the Kashia Pomo people as a whole, to all of us. And so we took that back and we've had it ever since. And we've been, doing projects out there. We've had Congress out there. We've, we individual tribal members bring their families to go mushroom hunting and to hike and to fish. We've done ceremony out there. We've done some, funerary rites out there as well. All things that we were not able to do on our coastline for a very long time. And we've restored a significant piece of our culture to our coastline. So it's been a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. And I myself take my kids, we go camping out there and just enjoy being along our coastline. And yes, Annie, the mountain lion is still out there. And yes, she still smells. And yes, she leaves us alone.
And Annie is writing in the chat. Shout out to Brendan Moriarty, who worked for Trust Republic Land at the time and helped, I would imagine, with some of the real estate transfers.
Still mad at Brendan. He was supposed to name his kid after me. He didn't. So I'll tease him
no.
about that for eternity. But it's all good. Love Brendan.
We actually have a interview that Sheridan filmed with Brennan Square Land Trust that will be coming out in the next couple months. So keep an eye out for that. We've got a
My
good
guy. I love that man. He's a good guy. Good guy.
Yeah. Okay, so we got a couple more questions. So land back for dummies. What are 2 or 3 things non-native conservation leaders should start with in terms of land back or bear in mind?
Yeah. So, just depending, like, really the tribal capacity is huge, and understanding what the capacity of a tribe is. Land back at its core is a real estate transaction. Don't let anybody tell you any different. And remember that. And set your expectations early with a tribe. Remind them that that's what it is. we trust TPL, and everybody else was really good about that with us. But Kashia has ears to listen, and some tribes won't. They're just going to say, land, yay. And it's like, dude, this is real estate transaction. How are you going to pay the taxes on this? So you just really, 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 the capacity issue is huge. Capacity, because tribes can get that land back, but what are they going to do once they get it? And having that plan in place is important. And then for us, we have easements that we allowed, and easements are a great way for planning and paying for future things. Endowments are a great way for planning for future engagements, activities, and paying for capacity. So you really have to have a big discussion on how to build capacity. And so capacity is the first one. Planning is the second one, and the third one, which is the one that everybody wants to skip to but has to be third, is know how to celebrate. And when we did our Kashia Coastal Reserve, we celebrated in a certain way, and there was a public version and a non-public version that we did, and all of it has been captured on video. If you Google Kashia Coastal Reserve, you'll see different videos that exist. All of them really cool, and all of them very, very special. And so we were able to capture a lot of that stuff. But what you don't see are all the tribes that pledge to our roundhouse. They pledge to our center pole, all coming, and all of their spiritual leaders coming to bring traditional gifts to us. So that's the plan. The celebration part is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. As we wrap it up, I want to ask you one more question, which is like, how is land back? How do you see your advocacy at the federal and state level, the tribal level? How do you see this as healing work for the world, really?
Yeah, I tell people a lot all the time, actually, that like Kashia, our religion's not portable. It's land based, and not all Indian religions are that way, but most of us, and even the tribes that are in other people's lands, there's a reason why their doors face a certain way, always to the motherland, right? And the most egregious act of genocide that was ever done to non-native people that live on our lands was taking those individuals off their lands and an attempt to destroy their connection to their homelands. And to me, as a Kashia man, seeing that done is the heartbreaking part of things, and then being able to see people when they get restored to their land, knowing what that feels like, for us, just in the simple thing of restoring us to our coast, I can only imagine. And so land back takes on so many different emotions and different, healings to a person and a culture and a society. In providing the land to the Kashia people and the dollars to the Kashia people for the purchase of that land, the county of Sonoma and the board of supervisors, the chair said directly to me, I want to apologize for the things that were done to you and to your people. And while this does not make that right, this is part of the people of Sonoma County trying to make that right. And and that acknowledgement right there in itself is a healing thing. They talk about generational traumas and not letting those things define who we are today, but never forgetting it, right? And so the apologies, the sincere apologies with actions that follow it, are ways of healing. Giving land back, donating land back, restoring land back to tribes is an action that facilitates healing, not just spiritual healing, but a healing to the soul of the tribes who were done wrong. And so it's a beautiful thing to see happen. I wish more of it happened. I'm glad to see that it's happening now, and hopefully it continues to for a very, very long time.
Yeah. Well, today I think you gained like 60 more co-conspirators in that work.
Right
So
on.
hopefully
Hello, conspirators.
yeah, we're gonna build some momentum and make this happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us today, Chairman Franklin. I really appreciate it. We've been wanting to talk to you for a long time, and we knew this was the year that we were going to make that call. So I was like, Rose, have your dad call your uncle. We gotta make this happen. So I really appreciate the favor and coming to chat with us. I think everyone got a lot out of it. And maybe one day, maybe next year, we'll get to bring this group out to Kashia Coastal Reserve to check it out and learn more.
Let's make it happen. Happy to do it. Yeah.
Cool.